You just told yourself you were done. One piece. That was the deal. And then somehow the wrapper is gone, the bowl is empty, and you are already looking for more. It was not weakness. It was not poor willpower. What just happened to you is one of the oldest survival programs ever written into a living brain, and it has been running in your body for millions of years before sugar even existed in a bag. The real reason you cannot stop eating sugar has nothing to do with discipline. It has everything to do with the world your brain thinks you still live in. Your brain is not modern. That is the first thing you need to understand. The structure firing signals in your skull right now was largely shaped during the Pleistocene epoch, a stretch of time that began about 2.6 million years ago and only ended around 12,000 years back. For almost all of that time, your ancestors lived in environments where sweet food was extraordinarily rare. A ripe piece of fruit, a hidden honeycomb, berries in season for maybe a few weeks a year. That was it. That was the entire sugar supply. And in that world, sweetness meant something specific. It meant energy. It meant calories. It meant survival. Because the opposite of sweetness, the bitter and the sour, those flavors were the tastes of poison, of rot, of things that could kill you before morning. So your brain evolved a system, a ruthlessly efficient, non-negotiable system. When you taste something sweet, your brain releases dopamine, not a little, a significant flood. The same neurotransmitter involved in reward, in motivation, in the feeling that whatever just happened was worth doing again. Your brain does not ask whether you need the calories. It does not check whether you have already eaten. It simply marks the moment as a success and tells your body to repeat it as soon as possible. Researcher Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan has spent decades separating the brain's wanting system from its liking system. What he found is counterintuitive and a little unsettling. The dopamine response is not about pleasure. It is about craving. It is about drive. You can like something without craving it, and you can crave something you no longer particularly like. Sugar triggers the wanting machinery specifically, which is why you keep reaching for it even when it stops tasting as good as you expected. Your brain's wanting circuit does not get the message. But dopamine is only part of the mechanism. The other part lives in your gut, in a signaling pathway that your ancestors never had to worry about exploiting. When sugar hits your small intestine, your body releases a cascade of hormones, including GLP-1 and insulin signals that travel directly to your brain's reward centers. This is a separate route from taste, a completely independent channel. Researcher Iván de Araujo at the Econ School of Medicine at Mount Sinai ran a set of experiments that changed how scientists think about this. He gave mice a modified form of sugar that tasted sweet but had no nutritional value. He also gave them a tasteless solution that delivered real calories. Over time, the mice overwhelmingly preferred the solution with real calories, not because they tasted it, but because their gut-to-brain signal was telling them something nutritious had arrived. Your gut talks to your brain, and it has its own opinion about sugar. So now you have two independent reward pathways both responding to sugar. The taste pathway fires dopamine and says, "Do that again." The gut pathway reads the calorie signal and says, "That was worth it." Evolution stacked both systems on top of each other because in the ancient world, that combination was never a problem. Sweet things with real calories were rare and seasonal and required physical effort to find. You were never going to overconsume. The system could run wide open and it would still never overwhelm you. Then, something changed. It did not change slowly. Refined sugar was extracted from sugarcane and beetroot at industrial scale starting in the 18th and 19th centuries. Before that, the average person in England consumed around 2 pounds of sugar per year. By the mid-20th century, that number had climbed past 100 pounds per year. Your genome had no time to respond. The brain that was calibrated for a world of scarce sweetness suddenly found itself swimming in an unlimited supply of the exact stimulus it was built to pursue without limit. But it gets more complicated, because the food industry learned something that your evolutionary history made inevitable. The foods that are most difficult to stop eating are not just sweet. They are engineered to hit multiple reward pathways simultaneously. Fat and sugar together. Salt and sugar together. crunchy texture that delivers a sensory signal of freshness and novelty. Melt-in-your-mouth consistency that prevents your brain from registering that you have chewed anything, which delays satiety signals. These combinations do not exist in nature. A ripe mango is sweet. A piece of fatty meat is savory. Almost nothing in the natural world is both fatty and sweet and crunchy and dissolving all at once. Researcher David Kessler, a former commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, documented this in his research and in his book on the subject. He coined a term for the deliberate engineering of food to maximize palatability and suppress the feeling of fullness. He described how food companies studied what combinations triggered the most consumption, then built their products around those combinations. He called it hyperpalatable food. And hyperpalatable food does something specific to your brain. It does not just activate the reward system, it activates it at a level your reward system was never calibrated to handle. In the same way that a sound system turned up past its design limit begins to distort. The result is that your normal satiety signals get overridden. Leptin, the hormone your fat cells release to tell your brain that you have had enough, has a harder time competing with the dopamine and gut signals that hyperpalatable food keeps triggering. Your fullness is real. Your body knows it, but the craving signal is louder. And this is before you factor in what sugar does to your blood. Refined sugar, stripped of fiber, hits your bloodstream fast. Your insulin spikes to meet it. Then blood glucose drops sharply. And when blood glucose drops, your brain reads that drop as a threat, not a minor inconvenience, an alarm. Because for most of human history, a falling blood sugar level meant you were running out of fuel in an environment where the next meal was not guaranteed. So your brain activates hunger signals again, not because you are empty, but because your glucose just fell, and the fastest solution for a falling glucose level is, of course, more sugar. You are not imagining this. The cycle is biological. You eat sugar, you feel satisfied, the glucose spike drops, your brain triggers a hunger alert. You want sugar again. A loop that has no natural exit when sugar is always available. There is a final layer here that almost nobody talks about. Your gut microbiome. The trillions of bacteria living in your intestine have metabolic preferences. Certain strains of bacteria thrive on sugar and refined carbohydrates. Research from teams including those led by Rob Knight at UC San Diego has shown that your gut microbiome composition can influence your food cravings through the gut-brain axis. The bacteria that feed on sugar are not passive passengers. They produce compounds that influence your mood, your hunger signals, and your food preferences. When you eat more sugar, those strains multiply. When they multiply, the signals they send up the vagus nerve push toward more of the same. Your cravings are partly your own, and partly a negotiation with a population of microbes that have their own evolutionary agenda. So when you reached for that second piece, the deck was stacked in ways your willpower was never designed to compete with. A brain built for scarcity. Two independent reward channels both firing. A blood sugar roller coaster that triggers false hunger. An engineered food supply designed to outrun every satiety mechanism you possess. And a gut full of bacteria voting for more. The question worth sitting with is not whether you have enough discipline. The question is what it even means to make a free choice about food when so much of that choice is being made by systems laid down millions of years before your particular brain existed. Tonight, when you reach for something sweet, that reach has been in motion for a very long time. The hand moving toward the sugar is ancient. Only the sugar is new.